Well, welcome. Thank you for doing this, by the way. Thanks for taking time out on a Sunday. And folks, thanks everybody for being here. It's Sunday.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Sure. I'm actually very interested and excited to talk to you about some of the stuff you're doing I guess, research into. And so I know you have a background in looking at some of these alternative proteins and some of the pros and cons of that, I suppose. And so I guess we should discuss that. Can you give us a little bit of your background, if you don't mind?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a clinical nutritionist and kind of dubbed myself this title of eco-nutritionist. I am originally from Colorado, and I started out my whole journey actually in conservation work. So I got my undergrad in biology, and I had a focus in environmental studies and ecological work. So actually, for a year or two, I worked in the Rocky Mountains, working on some endangered ecosystems. And, I did that for, like I said, a year or two. And then I decided I wanted to go into the field of health and nutrition. And so I looked at schools all over the country, found a really awesome master's degree in integrative nutrition. And so I relocated to the East Coast. I live now in Maryland, and I've been here for about 10 years. And, after I finished grad school, I kind of worked in a few different settings with functional medicine doctors, conventional medicine doctors, so a variety of clinics, and got a ton of different experiences working in those settings. And for the past, since July of last year during the pandemic, I decided to just start my own private practice, and it's been going really well. And it's also afforded me time to really work with, the regen ag community. I really started getting into regen ag about, I'd say 6 or 7 years ago. And, it really blew my mind, because I originally kind of held on to some old beliefs that, meat is bad for the planet and we should be eating less meat. And so it was a big paradigm shift for me. And I give a big shout out to my dear friends, Carl and Seth at Soil for Climate, because I learned a lot from that group. They have a really great Facebook group and a lot of wonderful conversations that take place about regen ag. So, I learned a lot from them. I started getting into the work of, some soil scientists, Christine Jones and Elaine Ingham. And, I saw talks from Ray Archuleta and, Alan Williams, Gabe Brown, a lot of the folks you've had on your show. I just applaud you so much for doing that too, for shining a spotlight on the regen ag community, because this is an incredibly important movement right now. And, I truly learned the value of livestock on the land and how they can just quickly regenerate ecosystems, as you've learned too. And so, my big mission now is just to teach that to consumers. And we could talk more about some of the other work I've done, and it's been enlightening for some farmers as well that have told me, what you're speaking about with the health benefits of adding more meat into the diet have influenced, these farmers to start incorporating livestock into their operations as well. So that's been really inspiring for me. And I'll just say too that I was very fortunate to be able to speak at a conference March of last year, right before everything started to lock down, right? No more conferences. And Alan Williams was the keynote speaker there, along with Glenn Elzinga, who you might be aware of too. Actually, I think you've had him on your show. So I was so thankful that conference didn't get canceled, because, I connected with Alan. And so since then, Alan's been, he's had me do webinars and write articles for Understanding Ag. So I'm kind of part of that team. And in a few weeks, we'll be going down to Alabama and doing some field work. So right now, I dedicate a lot of my time to regen ag, just a huge passion of mine.
Yeah, I've interviewed Alan a couple of times, and I've interviewed Glenn. But like I said, most of the folks you've mentioned, I've had discussions with, and I think it's tremendous. In fact, I spent yesterday hanging out with a regenerative rancher who's down the road from me. He was kind of showing me his newest project, and so I spent a couple hours on his ranch. One of the things, this is really timely, because we just have Joe Biden announcing his climate goals, and one of the, and it's not been sort of explicitly said, but I mean, one of the areas of potential climate mitigation is going to be through animal agriculture. And I think there's a lot of misinformation and poor understanding around that, and we see these sort of this bizarre laws being sort of proposed, places like Colorado with the Paws Act. Oregon has one that's similar, basically outlawing, essentially, banning animal husbandry and, and banning animal slaughter for the most part. There's obviously some education needs to be done. And I think not only do the people that make the policies need to know to understand this, but the people too, because there's a lot of people that just believe whatever they read or see, or, whatever has been bought for on the TV, because it's being paid for by people that have an interest in, doing things the other way. There's a lot of, so we can segue into this. There's a lot of talk around alternative protein sources. We're going to replace meat with X, Y, and Z, whether it's cell culture technology or, the 3D printing of plant proteins. So let's talk a little bit about those topics, if you don't mind.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, well, I've written a series of articles for Understanding Ag on the whole topic of plant-based meats, and I wrote one just recently, finished up kind of the third part of that series. And there's always more that we could expand on. I focused sort of exclusively on the health issues, especially considering my profession. But there's a lot of environmental concerns, of course, with the plant-based meats we talk about. But so I wrote a series of articles called Artificial Animals, and just really dived into a lot of the science behind everything from the isolated, proteins that are in these foods, the contamination, the concerns with the glyphosate and other pesticides that are being used on these products, the additives, the soy-like hemoglobin is incredibly controversial. And so I found some interesting research on that was pretty concerning. So, I just really focused on the health issues primarily.
Yeah, let's talk about the soy-like hemoglobin. This is the Impossible Burgers. They've patented their food, which is also very concerning, turning their food into intellectual property. But that's a compound that humans have not been exposed to. We have no long-term data on this. And so, can you delve a little into what is that? What is soy-like hemoglobin, and why are we concerned about it?
Yeah, so this is, of course, this is exclusively in Impossible Foods products, so it's not in any other plant-based meat products at this time. And it's actually patented, and Seth Itzkin wrote a really good article about the patents that Bill Gates has on, this product essentially. But when it comes to the soy-like hemoglobin specifically, they had to find a way to manufacture heme to mimic the taste of meat, the taste and appearance of meat. So, what they did, originally they started actually harvesting the roots of soy plants, because that's where you can find soy-like hemoglobin. And they realized that was completely unsustainable. They actually have a comment on their website, that says, oh, we realize this is terribly destructive to pull up all these soy plants and, essentially release carbon. Like, they recognize that's a problem, which is incredibly hypocritical, because they're, producing all this soy that's destroying ecosystems, right? But, they found out that was unsustainable, and that they had to essentially genetically, they had to create it in a more industrial scale. So what they do is they sort of put the genetics of the soy-like hemoglobin into yeast and manufacture it that way on a mass scale. And, I found this article, and I did quote it in a third article that I just wrote, but it was published by an organization called GMO Science. And it was called Rat Feeding Studies Suggest the Impossible Burger May Not Be Safe to Eat. And it was co-written by a molecular geneticist, Michael Antonio. And I mean, they really looked at this research very carefully. I looked at those studies myself, and it's really hard to understand what's really happening with those rat studies unless you are really a researcher and can kind of interpret that type of data. But what he essentially found was that there, were statistically significant adverse effects in this rat feeding study. And mind you, this is a study that was basically conducted kind of in-house by Impossible Foods, by their own researchers. So it was not a third-party study. and it showed, changes in blood chemistry, decreased blood clotting ability, decreased like blood glucose, which may or may not be a bad thing, but when you take it in context of all the other changes that they saw, it was concerning. Decreased blood levels of alkaline phosphatase, that can indicate malnutrition, and so there was all these concerning changes that researcher really discovered. So I talked about that in my article and really highlighted their research. And so there's a lot of unknowns, with consuming something like this. And what was interesting is that the FDA originally kind of said, no way, they didn't grant GRAS approval, which is generally recognized as safe. They didn't give GRAS approval to soy lake hemoglobin, the GMO soy lake hemoglobin. But then they looked at the studies, that's when Impossible Foods commissioned all those studies, and then submitted that to the FDA, and the FDA just said, okay, here's your GRAS certification. And it's like, did you guys even look at that? Did you even read that research and really carefully analyze this? So that's where the Center for Food Safety, CFS, is really pushing back, and they actually filed a lawsuit against the FDA for just allowing this to be on the market.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is we probably won't know for many years what the effects are on people, and we may not be able to sort it out because it's so difficult to determine the effects of food on people, and it's just, more sort of processed, chemically derived foods that we clearly have not evolved to eat. I mean, that's clear, but whether it's going to have a deleterious effect on us is something that our children and grandchildren may end up finding out. But let me ask you about, so there's concerns about environmental sustainability, and I've seen claims made by Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, but they don't have their data. They've not actually demonstrated any of it. It's all speculative and hypothetical, correct?
Right. Yeah. I mean, what I would say, so are you familiar with the Qantas study that did the life cycle assessment on plant-based meats, and down at Will Harris's farm at White Oak?
Yeah, the White Oak. Yeah, I'm familiar with that for sure. Yeah.
So when it comes to something like that, like a life cycle assessment, where they're essentially they measured the total greenhouse gas emissions from beginning to end of production. What went into producing that food, growing it, producing it, processing it, getting it to market. And the only thing I could say about the plant-based meats where they slightly win their argument is when we look at the greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so when we compare the greenhouse gas emissions, at least based on that Qantas study, when they looked at the greenhouse gas emissions from CAFO operations, right, as your audience probably knows, concentrated animal feeding operations, factory beef farms, there was a substantially higher amount of greenhouse gas emissions compared to the plant-based meats. But then you look at, White Oaks and the research that was done there on Will Harris's farm, and of course they have a net negative greenhouse gas emissions. So in other words, they're sequestering carbon, right? So that's where they lose big time, because if we have more research that shows that, which we absolutely need, if we have more research that shows that, and that's, Richard Teague and Paige Stanley, and, they're all working on that, as you know, and the more we have that, we can really counter that claim that this is better for the environment. And also say there was a little debacle on LinkedIn recently on Impossible Foods LinkedIn. It was the vice president of, marketing communications, if I recall correctly. She made the announcement that they were that Impossible was going to say, "We are meat." That was like their new ad. I don't know if you saw their new ad campaign. And we gave them, we being a lot of us regen aggers, we were kind of giving them a lot of hell over that. We were saying, no, look, you can't make that claim. This is not meat. You're not doing anything to regenerate soil. And we, point blank asked them that question several times, what can you tell us about what you're doing to regenerate soil and ecosystems? And they can't answer that question, right? Because they have, you know, no leg to stand on. They're not doing anything to regenerate ecosystems. It's a degenerative process. So we definitely need more research to back up what we're saying, but we can, you know, I saw your interview with Peter Bick, and they're also doing, him and his team are doing great research. You know, we just need more research to back up what we're saying, but we can also clearly see what's going on, right, with regenerating ecosystems through regenerative grazing. And there's absolutely no way these plant-based meats can do that.
Yeah, just to bring it back to the nutritional side, I'm not sure for sure if you're familiar with the work of Stefan Van Vliet and like Fred Provenza, I think at Duke, looking at, you know, it's not just a few amino acids and fatty acids and a couple of vitamins, it's a range of thousands of different compounds with the nutritional differences, many of which we probably have no idea yet what they do. You know, if meat has 50,000, beef has 50,000 individual unique compounds, we probably only know what 1% of them even do in the human body. So what are your concerns about the nutritional adequacies or inadequacies of you know, replacing meat with a plant-based alternative?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's yeah, the research that Fred and Stefan are doing is fantastic. Fred's been a dear friend of mine for years now, and I'm so thankful for his book Nourishment and him teaming up with Dr. Van Vliet and putting out more research about all the amazing phytochemicals, you know, in meat and fats of animals that are essentially grazing on a phytochemically rich diet. And so I've talked about that in some of my webinars. And I even said in my most recent webinar on the microbiome that I'm super intrigued with the carnivore community, you know, you guys, and what your anecdotal reports about improved gut health and even improved microbiome health, you know, because I think that we're going to discover, we're already discovering, right, that fiber is kind of overrated, and I think it has a lot more to do with these polyphenols and these, you know, all these different phytochemicals, and we can derive a lot of that from meat. And so that's probably one mechanism, you know, by which that's shaping the microbiome. And I know you're familiar with Lucy Mellings and her research, and that it's some of these, you know, the butyric acid that can be derived from ketones to help influence gut health. But yeah, I think I'm excited about some of the studies that that Stefan's working on, and I hope to, we're talking about collaborating, so I want to get some case studies published, you know, with patients that I'm working with. And yeah, I've talked about some of that in my webinars, presenting case studies on the health improvements I see when people increase their meat and, you know, switch the quality of their meat. But I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about the current research they're doing, but I know they're looking at doing some RCT type trials where they're looking at, you know, a group of people eating more processed foods and people that are eating a diet high in, I guess, regenerative meats, and looking at health outcomes that they get.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the butyrate, and that's been sort of the recent sort of rallying cry for fiber is, bacteria in the gut, you know, process fiber into a short chain fatty acid called butyrate, and that has been shown to potentially protect the colonic mucosa. You know, I just recently saw a person with ulcerative colitis who actually had his butyrate levels assessed on a meat-based diet, and they were completely normal, completely fine. So there is these second mechanisms, and hopefully, you know, somebody will take it on to do a study in that particular realm and looking at, you know, these people that are, you know, eating just, you know, I think the carnivore community is the optimal community to test these theories around the positives or negatives around meat. And hopefully, and like I said, we are raising money to do a study here as well, but we're still a ways to go from our goals, but hopefully more people will do that. Do you have any actual clients that, you know, that you do you do individual nutritional stuff still?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one thing I never really want to stop doing. I always want to have at least a small clinical practice, and in fact, right now I'm looking for folks who do want to be, you know, case studies. And with case studies, you know, I need someone who's kind of already not on a carnivore diet, so we have more of a baseline to see where they're at right now, and then see the health outcomes they get once they do more of a carnivore diet. But I have a small handful of patients that are carnivore, and one of them I just did some stool testing with, and I'm seeing the same thing you're mentioning. You know, good butyrate levels, and, you know, their short chain fatty acids looked pretty good. And this is someone who's not eating any fiber. So I I'm excited to present more of that kind of research in the talks that I do, because that's, yeah, it's we got to get that information out there about, it's just not about the fiber anymore. And it was a big, like I said, big paradigm shift for me to accept that, like I've been preaching fiber for so long, and it's not until the last couple years or so that I started realizing this is not, it's not good for everybody. And it does make some people a lot worse, depending on what's already happening in their microbiome. So I work with a lot of SIBO patients. For those of your audience don't know, that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, a lot of issues with fungal overgrowth, yeast and mold. So I do a ton of gut healing in my practice. That's probably the first place I start with just about everybody. And, I would say that easily half or more of my patients are autoimmune, and, with one or more autoimmune conditions. So that's a huge focus of mine, is immune system dysfunction. And, heart disease, diabetes. I work with just a whole variety of patients. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about your research too, because I did watch your talk with Ivor Cummins recently, I think a couple weeks ago, and you mentioned that. So I think that'll be really powerful evidence for carnivore diets.
Yeah, we're planning on doing a very large interventional study, again, taking people that aren't on a carnivore diet, putting them on for a period of time, and then tracking a number of things, looking at outcomes, and comparing that to another group, hopefully, if we've got the funding for that. But, interestingly, you mentioned SIBO. I interviewed Dr. Peter Martin, who I think is from Switzerland. He's got a case series of about 6 patients, SIBO, all treated with carnivore diet, 100% resolution of symptoms based on gut methane production and symptomatically. So that's pretty interesting.
Awesome.
Let me ask you about, do you touch on cell cultured meat? Have you went down that rabbit hole yet?
No, I know you asked Peter Vick that question too, and I'm kind of in the same boat as him. Like, I haven't dived into that too deep. Our friend Steven Zwick has written a really great article on that. So that's kind of what I send people when they ask me about it. I don't know if you've read that he wrote, the romance and reality and romance of cultured meats, the cell cultured meats. So I highly recommend people check that out. They want to learn more about that topic. But no, I haven't dived too deep into that yet.
Yeah, it's something that I think is something you're really looking at. And Steve is actually in this meeting right now. I see him in there making comments. And so, and yeah, he's got some great stuff that's well worth reading. And it's, goes into that. And one of the things that he introduced me to, and I'd known about, the protein inputs and where do you get your protein from? It's going to be from, basically GMO monocrop peas and soy and whatever. And some of the requirements, but just the heating and cooling requirements. I didn't think about that, but you've got to run these giant vats at a temperature of basically cow body temperature or something similar, and that's very expensive to do that.
Yeah.
If you're producing billions of pounds of product and maintaining that, it's just a environmentally expensive process, and so there's much more. And he's linked that in there for you guys that are in the chat and want to look at that. Again, I think it is incumbent upon all of us to educate ourselves so that we can get this message out there. And the more of us that are talking at, you've got to get to the people that are going to be in charge of these policies, because if we don't say anything, we're going to be outcompeted by the folks in Silicon Valley that are pumping billions of dollars into producing this market to drive meat to where it's too expensive for anybody to afford it. So
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell me about, you said eco-nutrition. Can you elaborate a little bit more what that means?
Yeah. Well, so like I said, with my background in ecological work, I'm super thankful for that education and that experience, because that, just gave me such profound appreciation for ecosystems, how they work, how they function, the complexity of nature. And, so kind of everything really came full circle, once I finished my master's degree in nutrition and then started learning about regenerative agriculture. At the time I lived with a roommate, she was a retired neurologist, and she was actually vegetarian, but she was really interested in this idea of regenerative grazing. And she was talking about soil all the time, and, how important it was for the nutrient density of our food, and at the time I didn't fully appreciate it. I was still kind of finishing up grad school, and I just wanted to get my degree finished and get through that. And she's gone on and on about soil, and I'm like, okay, that's great, Jenny. I just, whatever, soil. But I started learning about it. I started listening to her, and I thought, you know, this is it. This is the connection. This is how we get more nutrient density in our food. This is how we can help really save this planet in so many ways, right? With sequestering carbon, regenerating ecosystems. Our, you know, our Great Plains in this country, our grassland ecosystems are just, they're dying, right? And they are a huge opportunity to sequester carbon. And so that whole idea of eco-nutrition for me was to teach consumers about how their food choices are impacting the environment, impacting the world. And it's not just about our health anymore. We have to think about the health of this planet. And so, and also just teaching that same thing to farmers. You know, like I said, I've had a few farmers reach out to me and say, you know, I was moving away from the idea of putting livestock on my land because they're hearing this plant-based meat, you know, agenda. They're hearing the message from that group and thinking, well, I don't want to raise livestock. You know, what do I want to do that for if that's not, there's not going to be a demand for that. So, and of course they have concerns about the health issues of meat too, that they keep, you know, hearing. So that to me has been really inspiring to know that, you know, my work is not just for the consumers, but also for the farmers and ranchers, you know, to hear that message that what they're doing is extremely important by incorporating livestock.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar experience in 2018. I was asked to present a talk at the U.S. Cattlemen's Association up in Billings, Montana, and I sat in front of a room of all these cattle ranchers and had to convince them that they were actually had a health food that they were making, and a lot of them didn't know that or didn't realize that they had bought into the kind of the mainstream dogma that, you know, meat is kind of bad for us, and if anything, it's a complete opposite. So it's even educating the people that produce the food this and maybe inspiring them. What do you see the biggest? I mean, who are the advocates in this space that I think are going to help change the landscape? Because, you know, I mean, I think you can see the people that are the adversaries, the people that want to make their money selling you synthetic, you know, whatever, fake meat products, intellectual property. Who are the good guys in this, and how do we support them?
I mean, it's everyone right now that's in the regenerative agriculture movement, but it is truly the farmers and the ranchers, you know, that we have to get behind and support. And I see just a huge opportunity for the healthcare community to do that, especially the, you know, the functional medicine community. So, you know, just a little story. I was in, you know, there's a functional medicine Facebook group. It's a closed group to functional practitioners. There's thousands of practitioners in there. And somebody asked, you know, hey, what do people think about the plant-based meats? And I was so happy to see that everyone was like, no, 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 you know, and I just said, not just no, but hell no. You know, we have to really stand up against this whole push for the plant-based meat movement. And I just see a huge opportunity for healthcare practitioners to teach their patients that, to teach consumers that. You know, it's consumers, you know, everybody has an opportunity to stand up for our farmers right now and to really stand up against, you know, organizations, you know, that, you know, like the Bill Gates of the world right now that think that all we can do is, you know, technology our way out of the problems that we now face. And, you know, I really encourage everybody on this call today to look into the work of Vandana Shiva. And I'm sure you've looked into Vandana Shiva's information. And if you go on YouTube and look at a talk called Gates to a Global Empire, it's the first talk that comes up. And I mean, if people really want to understand what Gates is up to, that's an excellent talk to listen to. Just really smart, level-headed people from well-respected organizations all over the world that got together and were saying, this is what's happening. You know, this agenda, this plant-based agenda is very powerful, and there's a lot of money behind it. And so we really have to be strong and stand up against what's happening. And that's why I'm not afraid to tell Impossible Foods, you know, stop selling people a lie. Stop selling people a lie that this is going to be better for the environment and better for their health. That's what infuriates me the most, right? Is the lie that this is better for people's health when I see every day how sick people are. And this is just going to make people worse. So sorry to go off on a rant, but you know, I get really mad about that whole topic.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with that, and I'm often ranting. And I think one of the things that, we've sort of made these concessions. We have these Meatless Mondays. We have these in school where we're teaching the children to go plant-based. And I think really we need to take some of that back. Not only do we have to not accept any further encroachments on our nutrition, but we need to start, I've said that, because they're proposing this ridiculous legislature banning animal agriculture, calling, artificial insemination, sexual molestation of animals. I mean,
Yeah.
this is just ridiculous stuff. I mean, you need to equally go back and say, hey, we're going to make veganism illegal in Montana. You
Yeah,
can't do
exactly.
it. I mean, this is alleged. I mean, there should be some people that are actually proposing this stuff
Yeah.
to not only play defense all the time, but start playing offense, and to
Yeah.
say that no, we're not going to have meatless Monday in our school. We want high quality nutrition every single day for the children, and I think that's something that I think hopefully. I mean, obviously there's going to be some places where it's going to be easier than others, and I look at places like Montana, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, these places that, that's where their economy is. And I think they
Exactly.
should
Yeah.
do that. And hopefully we have some people that are maybe lawyers or legal that know how to put together legislation and get that stuff going. But
Yeah.
so outside of the ranchers, because like I said, we all know, support your local rancher, buy from them if you can, but there's got to be some other people in there. Is there any industry people? I know when I talked with Gabe Brown not long ago, and he said that there's some possible ties with industry. I think McDonald's is looking at it, and some other Cargill or something like that might be doing that.
Yeah, Cargill, recently partnered with the Rodale Institute, and I have a lot of concerns with that, and I did reach out to Rodale to voice some of my concerns, because from what I understand, and I'd have to go back and kind of read the article again, but they're basically partnering with Cargill to produce, organic, corn and I think soy, for chicken feed, essentially, because the part of that partnership was also Bell and Evans, which is a pretty large, a commercial chicken producer, but they're known for being, organic and not using any antibiotics, with their chickens. But I mean, that can be a step in the right direction, but it's still not really regenerating ecosystems. These are still monocrop operations. It doesn't matter anymore if they're organic. You and I know that. It doesn't matter anymore if they're just organic. That's not regenerating soil. That's still these monocrop operations that lack the diversity that is absolutely essential for regenerative agriculture and for regenerating soil. Creating healthy ecosystems requires diversity. And so we can't have just these monocrop organic operations and think that that's going to really save us. So I think there's a huge opportunity, for industry to get behind all these regenerative farmers and ranchers, and these kind of, like what Gabe has, stacked enterprise, sort of operations, right? Where it's not just livestock. There's a lot of other things that Gabe sells too, crops. So it's just like, there's a ton of opportunity for industry to be supporting the right thing. So I'm a little leery of that partnership, but it's like I said, it might be a step in the right direction. But a healthy chicken isn't going to be fed soy and corn, and I've talked about that. When we look at even just something as simple as the omega-3 and 6 differences, which gets a lot of attention, but if we go deeper than that, right, and if we look at the research Fred and Stefan are doing, let's look at phytonutrients. Let's talk about that. What about the phytonutrients in chicken and chicken eggs? So.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see. I mean, we've seen a tremendous rise in chicken consumption worldwide in the U.S. since 1960s or 70s. It's gone up, several hundredfold, whereas beef has gone down by about 30%. It's kind of slightly come up again in the last couple of years, but it's been generally down. And our health has not been any better for it, even though chicken is a more, I guess, technically efficient way to produce protein. But again, it may not be the best thing for us. I mean, I look back when I look at people ask me why I'm not so excited about chicken. I'm just thinking as ancestrally, if I had a spear and I was hunting and that's what we had, I mean, I would not be chasing birds around. I mean, it would just be a waste of time. And so that's why we we kill these big giant herbivores and we feast on them. I think that's a better my view on that, and it just, that's what I prefer to eat. One of the things that, with industry, there's certain industries clearly that will benefit from plant-based foods. These are going to be the people that manufacture it and sell that, the processed food industry, and then perhaps pharmaceutical companies, because they've got this continued supply of people that are eating cheap processed food and they continue to be sick. Surely there are some people that could afford to have healthy people. You seem like, Ford Motor Company, for instance, they would probably prefer to have their employees be healthy rather than calling in sick all the time and, having diabetic complications. So do you see any partnerships within corporate America or corporate world that could sort of offset some of these other folks, the Bill Gates and the, and the Impossible Burgers and those types of folks?
That's a really good question. Yeah. I mean, corporate nutrition's not an area I focus on a lot, but I certainly have colleagues that are, corporate nutritionists, and absolutely, that's another huge opportunity. And I think what we need, just goes back to the research. I mean, it's common sense for us at this point, for us in our community. We don't need the research anymore. And I have plenty of clinical evidence to show me, what a regenerative diet can really do for people. But if we have some solid research and a lot of, your research and case studies that practitioners can provide and say, look, this is what's happening to people when they actually eat more meat. Their inflammation markers go down, their body composition improves, their insulin resistant markers improve. I've just seen, it's amazing what happens to the inflammation panels. Inflammation markers just greatly decrease. And, and what does that do for people's immune system? It's just their immune system really is optimized. So yeah, I just think if we could go to corporations and say, look what's happening with this type of diet, would you have nutritionists or even just health coaches to talk to your employees about adopting this kind of diet protocol and see what it does for them over the course of a few months? I would love to see what would happen, with that.
Yeah, me too. That's one of the things, with what we do with MeatRx is something that, we're looking down the road at figuring out who would make sense to, to improve their health, because we're clearly improving people's health every day. I see it all day long, every day. I mean, I'm in this 24 hours a day, pretty much. What are the other, other concerns around sort of faux meat products out there that from an environmental standpoint, from a health standpoint, anything else that we need to be aware of?
Oh yeah. I mean, from a health standpoint, it's not just all about like the soy leg hemoglobin. It's just everything that's in those products, really. The isolated proteins. I wrote about how when we, high heat process soy to extract the proteins, it creates these other compounds that, again, we don't have research on. We don't know what the adverse health effects are. They've done some research in animals and seen adverse health effects. But, we are essentially the experiment for a lot of these things, right? Because we don't have long-term studies in humans on all these compounds. But the isolated proteins, the rancid fats, it's like all these polyunsaturated fats that just create more inflammation for people. And that's one of the big drivers of heart disease and, just chronic inflammation in general. All the additives, the flavoring agents, the yeast extracts. I mean, it's just all of there's nothing in those products, nothing that I could say is I would eat on a regular basis and would encourage anybody to eat on a regular basis. So like I said, I'll call out all those organizations all day long about it. And when Alan Williams asked me to write, those articles, when we were brainstorming together about, what should I do my next series of articles on, he wanted me, to address the plant-based meats. And I actually didn't want to write about it at first, because I just wanted to focus on, all the positive things going on within Regen Ag. But when I started researching it, I just couldn't believe what a huge problem it is. I kind of underestimated how significant of an issue these plant-based meats are. I just thought people are going to realize this is all processed crap. They're not going to buy this. This is a fad. It's going to die out. I mean, I honestly believe that. And I think a lot of people in the functional medicine community are probably thinking the same thing. And so they're not really educating their patients enough on how big of an issue it is. And I'm hearing from other practitioners, oh yeah, people are starting to eat this stuff now. Tell me what's wrong with it, because I want to make sure my patients understand. So, glad I wrote those articles. It's just an educational source for people, to refer to. But so I really go into more detail about the health problems. And I think, maybe someone like you, Stephen, and all the other people in the Regen Ag community can add to those series of articles and really dive into the environmental issues. And I say Stephen because, he did write another article called The Ecocide Burger. I think you may have read that, really diving into all the environmental issues with how they're growing the crops for these products. So.
Yeah, and like I said, I've mentioned he's got some good stuff there. One of the misconceptions out there is that these plant-based meats are designed for vegans or vegetarians, and that's not their target audience. And I always get people saying, well, why do vegans want to make meat, fit plants taste like meat if they don't like meat? It's really, I think something like 95% of their sales are going to omnivores, just because there's not that many vegans out there. I mean, there's only a few, there's only a couple
Absolutely.
small percentage. And so I think that people don't realize that if they can capture 25% of the market, I mean, that's a $500 billion a year market. The people that are, so how are they, so they're targeting the average American eating, standard American diet, eating, some meat a couple times a week maybe, and trying to get them to replace one meal or even all their meals if they're able to. What is what is a marketing strategy that they're using to convince people that are not plant-based eaters to give up some of their meat?
Yeah, well, that's where they kind of come from that whole angle of, this is better for the environment, and they really kind of, I think, push that a lot. It's very clear that they're not just going after vegans. They've said that from the beginning, that their mission, their stated mission on their website is to eliminate all animal livestock, by 2035. They're animals from the agricultural system. They're very aggressive in that mission. And so their whole strategy at this point has been to go after all the meat eaters and convert them, to eating this stuff. And that's their, like I mentioned earlier, their whole new marketing campaign with "We Are Meat," is very much targeted omnivores. And when we do, when I talked about this in one of my webinars, when we look at the consumer research studies on, asking consumers, why do you choose plant-based meats? People think there's a perceived health benefit, and that's the biggest driver, actually. It's not the environmental issues. So people, by and large, think this is better for their health, and they also fail to really look at the ingredients and critically analyze the ingredients. And that's something I've discussed a lot, because I just teach all my patients, I don't really care at the end of the day how much protein and fat and carbohydrates. Forget the nutrition facts label. That's such a reductionist way to analyze the nutrition in food anyway, right? Look at the ingredients. Your eyes need to go to the ingredients label first and foremost, and really critically assess what's in that food, what it's made up of. And, the nutrition facts are kind of secondary, but that's not what people do. In these consumer research studies, what people do is they look at the nutrition facts first and assess the health of that product based on that, the healthfulness of the product based on that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I tend to not eat foods that have ingredients labels. So, I mean, that makes it real easy for me, but I think that's probably even the best approach to that, I think. But
yeah.
what, and I know like I said, I think while many people, I think even people in the vegan community recognize that Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat and whatever Tyson and Cargill and whoever and Nestle puts out there is all going to be just processed garbage. I think they recognize that. And, the problem is most people think, well, if I'm eating a hamburger, I'm eating junk food anyway. And if I eat a Beyond Burger, I'm eating junk food anyway. I'm swapping one for the other. It doesn't really matter. But I do think when we get into this cell cultured meat, a lot of people are going to buy into that and say, oh yeah, that's better. And I think we really need to get in front of that and really sort of, let people know. And I think, like articles like Stevens and some of the other ones that need to be understood widely that's going on. So do you have any, when you speak with some of the folks in the regenerative agriculture community, do we talk about those things?
Yeah, a little bit, but to be honest, that has to be a bigger focus. You're absolutely right, because it's been kind of like obsessing over the issues with the plant-based meats, but we really need to, shift gears a little and start to focus on the cell-cultured meats. The concerning thing for me is, we don't have any studies, right? Do we have any research that tells us what this stuff does in our body? I mean, it's really creepy how it's kind of produced. And when I talk to my patients about it, and of course they're more educated at this point about food quality, I mean, it just sounds totally creepy to everybody. It's just like not something that appeals to them. But yeah, the average consumer who doesn't know better, you're right. I mean, they could be really taken with that whole idea of we don't need to raise animals, and then supposedly it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, which, we could challenge that at least when we look at what goes into these bioreactors and what it takes to produce this food. And I don't know if I'm sure you've seen the videos of the 3D printed meat and how totally disturbing that is. But yeah, I just, in my mind, obviously I'm biased though. I can't look at this stuff and see how people could want it. But, yeah, the cultured meat's a little different because it does look, I mean, it comes out like meat, right? So I don't know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, what you've looked into.
Well, I mean, I think, the question is, you can culture some muscle cells and, they've talked about artificial fats to augment that. They make fats out of something that's never been consumed by humans before. And so I just think the challenges are to make it even remotely close to actual meat. I mean, if you look at what's in meat, I mean, it's not just a slab of protein or muscle. I mean, there's an immune system, there's a nervous system, there's a circulatory system, there's a lymphatic system, there's fat, there's connective tissue, and there's these 50,000 different compounds. And to think that they're going to be able to take one cell and clone it over and over again by feeding it, who knows what stuff that a cow would not normally eat. To produce the same type of food is just, I think, ridiculous. But absolutely. What I've seen is, people are very much swayed by marketing, and, with a big enough marketing campaign, you can get people to eat anything, and I think we see that, with a lot of things that have gone on recently. We've seen when focused marketing campaigns happen, people do stuff that you would think is pretty crazy. But I do think we have to, like I said, I think this is something that even many people that are anti-vegan are buying into the plant, the idea of the cell cultured meat already. And I think that's just something that we need to, I mean, just really, really go after hard. And I think pushing this regenerative ag movement is something that is, very helpful. I think that, again, I'm in an isolated space. I see this stuff all the time. I see it growing. I see people accepting it. But again, when you look outside the bubble, are you 1% or are you 10%? It's hard to say. And I talk, and it's hard to get a feel for how much the movement is growing. I talk to different people and they say, well, it's grown some. I get more people interested. But what's the actual effect on, U.S. and worldwide agriculture? And it still seems to be 2%, 3%, something like that. Have you seen increased interest in this space, not only among the ranchers themselves, but among people that are interested in supporting those folks?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just following different conversations in various groups, I think the movie Kiss the Ground did, a phenomenal job. And, there's going to be another follow-up to that movie, really going into the health stuff. And, I think more documentaries need to come out, along that topic. I mean, Sacred Cow was great. Diana did a really good job of talking more about, some of the health issues and health benefits, of course, with adding more meat. And so I think the more we have that type of stuff, we're just going to create more consumer awareness, of course. I find anymore that, most people are just too busy to read books, but they'll sit down for a movie, right? And short films and, but a really groundbreaking movie like Kiss the Ground, it's just, we need more stuff like that. And so I'm hearing more conversations in different groups and interest about it. But yeah, I agree that there's still, we are kind of in this bubble, and we talked about this the other day on I was with the Great Plains Regeneration group, really great group, based primarily in Kansas. And, we're on all these webinars all the time talking to each other, but we're just really, we're just having these conversations with people in our own movement. And we need to find ways to just, to bring others into this. And
I mean, yeah, I think there's a natural partnership, obviously, between food producers and healthcare practitioners. I think that makes sense. We're already seeing some of that. But I do think getting some of these companies, these big companies that have a lot of capital that can make a difference, and let them know that, hey, we can improve your bottom line by helping your employees to be healthier. And I think that's something that has to develop.
Spot on. I haven't really thought about that as much, like I say, because I'm just not kind of in the corporate nutrition scene. But I think you're spot on. That has to be an area that we kind of target. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm trying to do my part, but it's a slog. It's definitely, it's every day, all the time. Trying to get people that are in influence, and social media can help to some degree. I'm always surprised when I get people like Michael Dell follows me, founder of Dell Computer, and these guys that are sort of people out there. So at least they're getting exposed to this stuff, and so at least when I see that, it's kind of not that any one person is better than other, but some people just have greater access and influence and resources than others. And so, I know we talk about Bill Gates, but then it's like, maybe Elon Musk has different ideas on how to save the planet. It's not fake burgers. And so, I mean, I talked to somebody who's friends with, I guess his brother is kind of somewhat interested in food systems and stuff like that. So that might be a way to do this, just kind of promote this regenerative agriculture stuff.
Yeah. Elon invested, I guess, in some of Peter Bick's projects, right? I didn't know that until he said that. So that was promising to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I see some people are just kind of looking, and they're just kind of throwing money in different places, and they're kind of covering all their bases, and they're saying, well, just like a venture capitalist, I'm going to invest in 20 things, and hopefully 2 of them pan out, and the other ones don't. But I think that's something. So tell us, we just got a couple more minutes here. Tell us more about where people can follow you, where they can read your articles. Are you on social media, that type of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly just have a Facebook at this point. I am on Twitter, but I don't have time to be active on all these things. I wish I did have more time, but mostly Facebook. My articles you can find on understandingag.com. And so that's a fabulous organization led by Alan Williams and Gabe Brown and Ray Archuleta, Shane New, and a group of other folks. So that's where we're putting out all of our work. Webinars, they do a lot of great webinars. They're actually going to do a webinar in just a few weeks or next month with Dr. Van Vliet. So he's going to really talk about his research and hopefully some of his future research he's working on. So they're always doing really great webinars. Yeah, I don't have a website yet. It's just been, I need to have create a website at this point, but you can email me if you do want to get in touch. It's Sara, without an H, Sara at eco-nutrition.com.
All right, thank you. I've interviewed everybody of that group that you mentioned, Understanding Ag, except Ray Archuleta. So maybe one day I'll get him.
You gotta get Ray on.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Ray's become a very good friend of mine. I went out to his farm a few months ago, and we're gonna go see him again. And we're just so much alike. It's funny. He calls me his little sister. So we are. Ray's my guy. You got to get him on the show. He's so animated and entertaining when he talks about soil. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I got to tell you, it's probably a good time to make friends with ranchers these days, because you just got to make sure you have somebody that can feed you.
That's exactly
particularly
right.
In this community. All right. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, folks. I'll see you guys back tomorrow. You guys have a great day, and I got about 4 pounds of meat to go eat now. So we'll see you guys in a little bit.
I know you're in the middle of your move too. I see you guys.
Yeah. We're in the middle of in fact, we gotta finish out this one room, and then we're done, and we're out completely out of this house.
Wow.
So. All right, guys. See you guys tomorrow. Take care. Bye. Thanks,
Thank you so much, Sean. Thanks for all you do.
Okay. Bye-bye.